known as the Healing Vet. Today, I want to talk about grief. But before I start doing that, I just want to show of hands, who here has had a pet in their life? A dog or a cat or a rabbit? Got a lot of hands up, just about everybody. Now, who here, when they have lost a pet, has had their heart broken? Been incredibly sad, perhaps even sadder than when they lost humans out of their life. So grief, for me, is the most honest measure of love in the universe. So the amount of grief that you feel when you lose an animal or anyone in your life shows you exactly how willing you have been to open your heart to love and how strongly you've been open to your heart to love. One thing I would love all of us to do today in this room is just to be willing to embrace healthy discomfort. Because grief is not the most comfortable experience that we have in our lives. There's a lot of pain in grief. There's a lot of loss. There's an emptiness. It kind of breaks us into pieces and we fall to pieces and have to somehow put ourselves back together in a new way without the presence of this heart, this soul, this being that has been a big part of our lives. And I want to talk a little bit about what I believe is the difference between healthy grief and toxic grief. Now, if you can embrace healthy discomfort, then you can have healthy grief, because there is intense suffering and discomfort when you're going through the grieving process. I often talk about grief being like a series of storms that are coming, and you can see them. You might be able to see them on the weather map first, and then you might be able to see them coming in the sky, and you know there's no way that you can escape these storms. You have to just find a way to batten down your hatches, clean up your life, and experience this overwhelming surges of emotion and feelings and sadness and loss that sweep across us when we are going through the grieving process. Grieving is what I like to call aggressively non-linear. There's no rhyme, no reason, no pattern in it. And any little tiny thing that we might not think is important can suddenly trigger us into immense waves of grief. I remember when I lost Tika, who was the naughtiest Staffy that ever lived. My last memory of her was her running away to chase a kangaroo, and she ran around onto the road, got hit by a car. And a vet who lived next door to us came and found her, but she didn't make it into town. And I was so upset I couldn't even go and collect her body. I just couldn't do it. But about 2 weeks after that, I got in my car and I sat in the car and I just burst into the most uncontrollable flood of tears that I've possibly ever experienced in my life. I couldn't work out why. Why? It's weeks later, and I thought the car smells like Tika. She'd driven everywhere with me for years, and that smell snuck in through my subconscious and just helped me crack open to this experience of overwhelming grief moving through me. So healthy grief means allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to move through the journey of recognizing through the feelings of grief how much love you've experienced with an animal. But toxic or unhealthy grief can come up in a couple of ways. One might be that you try to escape the grieving process by taking a quick sprint through it and perhaps a week later getting a new puppy and locking away that grief and not ever really meeting it. Another way that I see people do this is that little Fluffy's ashes are still sitting on the mantelpiece 20 years later. There's a clinging, an unwillingness to have closure, to scatter the ashes and release that energy of grief into the world and from your heart so that you can become well. Another thing that I see with large numbers of people now in my work, I help people through end of life with their animals all the time. And I've personally assisted a lot of animals to die. You know, it's a beautiful, powerful part of what I do as a veterinarian, is helping people work through decision points and how to know when it's time and how to let go, which is not the easiest thing. But I find that about 80% of the people who come to me, I'll often say to them, do you have any guilt about end of life with animals that have been in your life in the past? About 8 out of 10 people on average have this toxic guilt that they've been carrying around like, I don't know, like a hair shirt or a very heavy burden for a long time. About half this 80% of people are beating themselves up in one way or another because they feel like they chose to help their animal die too soon. And the other half are beating themselves up because they feel like they left it too late. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, in my experience of working with and helping hundreds and hundreds of people with hundreds and hundreds of animals, what I believe is that there is a perfect moment of inevitability that is just the time that needs to be for that given person in their given circumstances with that animal. And if any of you are here are holding any grief, I would invite you right now to forgive yourself and to realize that whenever you helped your animal step out of their body, in whatever was going on, in whatever way, I can promise you that it was just that moment of the inevitable that was perfect for all beings concerned at that time. Now, if you can't forgive yourself right now, I would invite yourself just to say, I am willing to completely forgive myself around any guilt that I might hold around the end of life of all the animals that have shared my life. Because willingness is the most amazing thing. It very quickly follows